So now we start with the main part of the course. And the first question that I will typically ask when I'm taking a course is, why do I need to know this? And so in this lesson, I'm going to talk about some reasons why I believe we need to know these concepts for climate negotiation. Basically, it's just a way of getting to know the lay of the land. So in this lesson, we will gain familiarity with the sources of climate change information. So what sort of information is out there? We'll start to look at the strengths and weaknesses of these sources of information. And we'll start to develop an understanding of the need for effective communication tools tailored to the specific sources of information. So that's where we're going to go. So the first question right off the top is, once again, why do I need to know this? Well, it's because climate change is scary, and the people we deal with are frightened, and often they're going to be hostile. And in fact, I see it as a way of grieving. Climate change represents a loss to people, and they're going through a grieving process dealing with that loss. And often at the beginning of grieving, they're going to be angry and in denial, and we have to deal with that if we want to create concrete action to deal with climate change. To do that, we need to have a reasoned dialogue. So we have to get the emotions out of it. We have to deal with emotional arguments, but we can't deal with emotional arguments like they are facts. People, when they're emotional, don't want to hear facts. They want to have you recognize the emotions themselves. So emotional arguments must be managed with the right sort of tools. And in fact, confronting anger with facts oftentimes just inflames the anger. And confronting anger with anger just creates more angry people. And oftentimes, especially in a climate negotiation, walking away is not going to help either. So we're kind of trapped here a little bit. We have to deal with angry people. We can't let ourselves get angry, and we can't just simply walk away for the most part. There are special cases, especially when dealing with trolls, but we'll come to that later. Now, social media is an angry place. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, most climate dialogue happens on social media, in Facebook, Twitter, a lot in LinkedIn these days. And it has some common features. It can be anonymous. Oftentimes it is anonymous. And it's easy to be extreme. And I mentioned already once, but it is exacerbated by trolls and bots. And so there is at play an entire realm of disinformation to misinform and inflame and distract in the argument. So that's something we always have to deal with while we're trying to do real negotiation with real people. And the other thing is that mainstream media is also noisy. So there's lots of data, and some of it may or may not be good information. You have to know your sources. And unfortunately, media feeds on conflict. That's their business. So it likes to present opposing views, and oftentimes the people who are presenting those views may not be very well informed. So you get misinformed people sharing their view on climate change, for example. And now the problem with that is it takes work for us. We have to take a look at how politically slanted it might be and how that might affect the way we use the information or respond to it. So we have to sort the wheat from the chaff, and which means we need to watch, read, and listen to a whole bunch of different sources from different perspectives. And to do that, you need the right tools. Now I'm going to take a short break here, and we'll take a look at a tool that I particularly like to use, and then we'll come back to the presentation. So I thought I would just take a couple of moments and go over one of my favorite tools for checking media bias. This is focused on American media, and unfortunately, we've not been able to find anything similar to this for Canadian media. So if you do come across something, feel free to share in the comment section below, and we'll check into it, and then we can use that to help inform other participants in the course going forward. This is called the media bias chart, and I will provide links to this in the notes below as well. Now, when you first open this chart in your browser, it's rather intimidating. And so I'm going to just start right here at the overview. From the top, it goes from the most extreme left-wing views, hyperpartisan, skewing to the left, neutral or balanced, skewing to the right, hyperpartisan right, and then most extreme right-wing views. And then going down the other axis, we have more reliable for news, but high in analysis and opinion content, this area here. Some reliability issues and or extremism, and then some serious reliability issues and or extremism. So as you go down the chart, it becomes less reliable and more extreme in its views typically. So it's like a triangle with the best, most reliable sources of data at the top, and then as you move down, a little bit more information in terms of opinion and analysis. So less data-driven and more analysis-driven. Now, to sort it out, I like to take a look at the bottom of the chart, and it has a list of the contributing sources for this. So, for example, if you click on BBC, which is a source I typically will go to for reliable news, you'll see, for the most part, their analysis over a number of articles shows that the reporting for factual news is pretty well balanced. A few skewing to the left sort of articles in the section where we're looking at a complex analysis. So in the BBC, for the most part, pretty neutral, but as they do more detailed analysis, a tendency to skew a little bit to the left. Now, if you look at Breitbart, which is a very common go-to source for folks who are looking for more right-leaning information, you'll see two things happen. It's skewing to the right or even into hyperpartisan right, and in some cases down into very extreme right-wing views. And it's getting less reliable as a source of data, so news data, so factual. So they tend to apply more of an opinion basis, and the opinion that the lens they look through tends to be skewing to the right, and in some cases very extremely to the right. Now, if we want to find something that is really quite nonpartisan, you would typically look for something like Reuters. Now, Reuters is primarily a news gathering organization. They don't do a lot of analysis, and you'll notice that most of their reporting tends to be neutral, balanced, without very much bias, and very factually reliable. And one last one, New York Times, which is one of my favorite go-to sources. And this is an interesting from this perspective. In the New York Times, for example, when they are reporting on strict news, factual news, they tend to be neutral or balanced. As they start to do more opinion, you'll notice as we start moving into analysis and opinion pieces, they tend to skew more to the left. So one of the takeaways from all of this is that we need to be careful in reviewing media, that we are understanding that, is this an opinion piece, an analysis piece, or is this just straight reporting? And one of the problems we will encounter in our work in climate negotiation is that often folks will confuse what is an opinion piece with factual reporting, and when in fact it's not. So I will, as I said, provide the links for this in the notes below. I encourage you to go and play in the site, check out your favorite news sources, see where they tend to skew. I would also dig a bit deeper into how they do their analysis. It's a very interesting process that they go through to peer review their analysis and make sure that they're doing the best they can to be unbiased in their reporting of these various news agencies. So with that, I'll return you back to our main theme and carry on with the presentation. So welcome back. So one of the other reasons we need to learn these skills is that people are uninformed. Now, their ignorance is legitimate. This is not a criticism of them in that way. It's just they just don't know. And more so, they don't even know who to trust. And because of their drawing their information from social media or from a wide range of mainstream media, they may often view credible sources with a lot of suspicion. So folks like NASA and the IPCC or universities may be deemed by average folks as unreliable. They may see them as being biased or having a vested interest in the issue. So we need to confront that. So one of the reasons we need these skills is because that's what we're dealing with. And trolls and bots just make it a lot worse. So, as I said, credible bodies are often accused of a vested interest, a bias, being in it for the money, being left-wing, having a socialist agenda, being globalist, being naive, arrogant, and elitist. And they may be accused of that all at the same time. So you could have somebody being accused of being a naive elitist or a biased globalist, or an arrogant and a naive left-wing socialist elitist. So, and the words are thrown around without a lot of actual meaning. So we need to understand that though the language is used, the meaning of the language is basically to send a sense of negativity as opposed to an actual defined what is an elitist, who is arrogant, those sorts of things. So we need to pay attention to that. So oftentimes these words are used as stones rather than as information. And coming back to it, climate change is scary. As I said earlier, people are grieving, they're in denial, and they're trying to shoot holes in the message. And they'll shoot the messenger to do that. So when we're talking to grieving people, we need to calm the waters. We need to have a rational discussion, and we need to help them through the grieving process. So we need to take them to a stage later in the process where they're more accepting of a process for moving ahead. Once we get them there, we can move forward to actually addressing climate change. But trying to convince somebody who is angry that they are wrong and that they should do something is typically a loser's game. But it can be done. We can get them there. The problem is, for most of us technical people, is that the methods come out of softer disciplines. These are things that are not common in science and engineering. As I said, don't push facts at an angry person. They tend to be unreceptive. And we don't fight anger with anger. That amplifies anger. And we can't walk away and discuss. People cannot help being uninformed. So we manage, like I said, with softer skills. This is effective communication, effective listening, and these are typically tools that are developed by professional counselors. Scientists and engineers are not usually comfortable with these sorts of tools. We tend to distrust them. We feel that soft skills aren't logical. But when we're dealing with emotions, soft skills are king. So what we need to do is to bring folks on side with the climate dialogue. We need to listen, identify their arguments. We need to address their anger. We need to deal with their emotions. We need to calm things down. Importantly, we need to find common ground. And then finally, we can work forward. And these are the skills we will cover in detail in this course. So my answer to the question, climate action requires engagement. The science is proven, so that's not the argument. Climate action is a policy issue. It's political, it's emotional, it's about jobs, money, and security. And those folks with the solutions to these problems need the skills to explain them to emotional people. Otherwise, we fail before we begin. So in this lesson, I covered very quickly the sources of climate change information, social media, mainstream media, generally not scientific literature. You may have noticed that gap. Typical average person does not go to the scientific literature. They look for somebody to talk to them about it. And we talk a bit about the strengths and weaknesses of these sources. Although it's readily accessible, it tends to be emotional. and the need to have effective communication skills tailored to those particular sources. And those are the things that we will cover in detail in upcoming lessons. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to comment below, join in the discussion there, and we will share what you have to say with the other participants of the course.